The topic today is atheism, and you know atheism is the opposite of theism. Okay, theism is the belief God exists, while atheism is the opposite, the belief that God doesn't exist is atheism rather. And there are quite a number of people who do not believe in God. It's unfortunate, or what can we say? Particularly those who come from Africa, where everybody, John Beatty says, we are notoriously religious, or reputably religious community, where religion is a key pillar of culture. Whether there are many other pillars of cultures, such as economics, politics, aesthetics, other pillars of culture, including morality. That morality, of course, we don't call it morality; we call it ethics. We also have kinship as a pillar of culture. Religion is a critical pillar that we even don't tell the difference between culture and religion. Even the idea of secular and sacred in Africa, it is a challenge because we do things for God. Our ancestors did everything for God. Whether you are king, you are mudhamaki, you are chief, you are elder, senior elder, reverend elder, adhamaki or whatever, or coyote, everything is for God. You do it for God. So when we hear somebody talking about atheism, we get very sad because we know how to live as a religious community, and religion being a pillar of culture, it becomes a very, very critical pillar that you even don't want to imagine that it is not there. You don't want to imagine it is not there. So today our topic is atheism. And I want to say an atheist is a person who does not believe in the existence of God. Commonly considered, atheism amounts to a denial of God's existence. It is derived from the Greek word atheos, which refers to a negation of God. Now, concerning the roots of modern atheism, this began with Ludwig Feuerbach, who lived between 1804 to 1872, and he was born in Germany and studied there under Hegel in the University of Berlin. Feuerbach's chief aim in life, as he stated, was to change the friends of God into friends of man, believers into thinkers, worshippers into workers, candidates for other world into students of this world, Christians who on their own confessions are half animal and half angel into non-whole men. So you see, this is a man, Feuerbach, the founder of atheism in the way we understand it in modern society, had a very ambitious agenda to make everybody an atheist. In other words, to change the friends of God into friends of humanity, to change believers into thinkers, just thinkers that be able to just thinking and justifying what you do, whether you are an atheist, you are able to think through, and comfort yourself in the way you want. And he also wanted to shape worshippers into workers, servants of God into servants of themselves. Okay? Friends of God into enemies of God. That is feedback for you. And that is what he wanted to do, to change the world and kill theism and usher in atheism. And you know, this was tried in communist China, communist Russia, and I think it didn't succeed. Karl Marx, with his own communist manifesto, also tried to show if you fix economics, all these other things are done. You have no problem so long as you have fixed your economy. So this has been tried for many years. and it seems not to be working. So atheism is a denial of theism of God who exists. If God does exist, the denial of his existence is obviously illogical. By sheer denial of God, indirectly make a contribution to the belief in God's existence. As will be noted in this lecture, there are many people who never regarded God highly. You can think of philosopher Nietzsche, the famous gentleman whom we keep saying he misread Adolf Hitler. He gave him very dirty philosophy that made him see the destructions of certain people as okay. And Nietzsche, even though, let me repeat, as will be noted in this lecture, there are many who never regarded God highly. Compare Nietzsche, who even though he thought that God is dead, as discussed earlier, of course, he didn't get the support he wanted from German students who wrote, Nietzsche is dead. It is not God who is dead, it's the fellow who is dead. And we said, death is death. It can be psychological, political, social, economic. Death is death. It can even be physical disappearance. Death is death. Nietzsche was dead even intellectually. The thinking now that he developed of promoting atheism among his students and writing a book that God is dead, of course, showed he was a dead fellow. Whether intellectual, spiritual, psychological, the man was not the man. The students in German universities knew those days. So the student exchanged by saying, God says Nietzsche is dead. They put placard. They were demonstration against their own major professor, Nietzsche. Now, who then can kill the other? Nietzsche killing God or God killing Nietzsche? Besides this, we are going to study two characters who contributed immensely on existentialism, the philosophy dealing with existentialism. Atheism, religion, and we also look at and science, religion and science. Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980. He was French existentialist philosopher. He claimed to be an atheist, yet he employed the religious language. He put forward, as long as there was a belief to be a God in the sky, men could regard him as the source of their moral ideals. The universe created and governed by a fatherly God was a friendly habitation for humans. With the disappearance of God in the sky, all this has changed. Sartre finds situation very distressing. He stresses the purposelessness of the universe and says that man's ideals are his own creation, and that man is alone and friendless in the world. He further stressed the world that the world is nothing but an immense spiritual emptiness. There is nothing spiritual in this world, according to this atheist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Okay, according to him, the world is a dead universe. Okay, Sartre finds it very distressing for those who think that without God, the world can go on just the same as before, as if nothing had happened. Sartre finds it very distressing for those who think that the world cannot survive without God. For him, whether there is God or no God, or there is anything, nothing can happen. The world continues as usual. Sartre, though Sartre employed existentialism philosophy, the philosophy dealing with existence, our existing, how we live, that is existentialist philosophy, and opposed strongly a certain type of secular moralism which seeks to suppress God. His arguments moved from existentialism to humanism. First, as a writer and philosopher, he emphasized that humans are unique and as individuals living in a different or hostile universe, responsible for their own actions and free to choose their destiny. He pointed out that existence is the starting point of philosophy. So philosophy starts with existence, according to Sartre. It is not about starting with God, but existence. Also that they underlined the role of human society in all-knowing and said that the potentialities of human beings are in condition and even human beings' condition and the human's capacity for freedom is not about God. It's about how you work out your existence. Another thing is that Sartre was influenced by Husserl and Heidegger. These other philosophers, Husserl and Heidegger. Of course, Heidegger lived between 1889 to 1976. That's the time Heidegger lived, and he influenced this gentleman in his atheistic philosophy. And Husserl and Heidegger took into account non-rational factors in existence. Heidegger was interested in problem of being rather than merely in the problem of existence. First, Sartre's main central thinking is on the fact of human freedom and responsibility. He taught that humanity is unique and isolated individual in different or hostile world. That man is responsible for his actions. That man, and the human being for that matter, is free to choose or his destiny. That human being in his concrete living, acting and deciding, must deal with his existence. That human being must exist not only as being, but has some understanding of his being. This draws right to the question of being itself. Second, Jean Paul Sartre's concern for human consciousness as one comes to existence. He stressed that humanity is conscious of the past, present, and future, by which humanity generates a self and a world. In other words, it is not God who establishes a self, okay, who generates a self and a world, but it is the human person. It is you, the way you decide. Nothing God. It is you decide what you want to become. Simple. Now, nothing contribution of any other being. And Sartre goes on to point out that the past is human beings' felicity, and he transcends the condition in his awareness, and they are separated from him as his past, but in leaving them, they haunt him. Okay? To be in the world is not to escape from the world to oneself, but to escape from the world to one's and beyond, and which is the future of the world. That he argues, he has confidence that human beings, not relying on God, but on their own, they can transcend and eventually escape from the world towards themselves, okay, and build a future without relying on deity or God. So knowledge puts us in the presence of the absolute. In other words, it is not God who is absolute. It is knowledge. So to know a lot, remember this is a good philosopher, good scholar, who pushes the theory of atheism to show knowledge alone is like a God. It is everything. You get what you want. Another point, the third point, Jean-Paul Sartre, this atheist philosopher, discusses idealism or realism accountably. No one can give account of his or her relations to another and be discovered by others. No one can give account of my relations to another, or discover, and I am discovered by others. In other words, no one can give account of another person's relations. I am even ashamed of myself when I become conscious, not of myself, but of myself as existing for another. By discovering the other, I discover that my liberty is limited by his, and I have another side that I don't see. Those are his ones. Started trying to show you don't need a community. You're on your own. You do not have anybody to tell you he's discovering you, he's praying for you, he's wishing you well. You can do it yourself. Okay? Yes, that is what he was trying to argue. That by discovering the other, I discover that my liberty is limited by his. So why do I have to bother myself with the community, with the other person? Okay? That makes me feel like my freedom, my liberty is taken away when I'm concerned with other people's reigns. Okay? That is another bit of his. The fourth point in Jean-Paul Sartre's atheism philosophy is that teaching about the past. The past is gone, but never forgotten. The past is the totality with growing on consciousness, which we are. While we live, we are not identified with the past. It is not what I am, but what I was. I'm totally responsible for it, and I cannot change its contents, but I can interpret it. Fifth, Sartre has concerns for love, where he pointed out that being loved gives me existence in realizing the liberty of the other. Lovers must know the language of love, which is give and take. Our actions take place in world where there is the other. He stressed that the loved one only becomes lover by becoming consumed with the desire to be loved. To love is an essence, the project to make oneself loved. To gain this end, to this end, the lover would have to reduce the world to the loved one and himself. The main purpose of a loving world have to reduce the world to the loved one and himself or herself. The main purpose of loving is giving the other security. He would be for the other supreme value and all of the world. In other words, he's saying to love is not to please God. To love is just to provide one another security. Nothing else, nothing God. It's just for security purposes. And also to make the world a lovely place. So loving one another is nothing but for your own comfort. There's nothing divine. There's nothing godly. It's not like how religious books say God is love, particularly the Bible. No, not at all. It is for you to make world a better place. Not even the world, but rather the people who are concerned, the individuals who have to love one another and reduce the world to a loved one, and even the person being loved to a loved one. Jean-Paul Sartre, the atheist, further contends that love is ruined when one treats the other as a thing or as an object, not as a subject, pursuing my liberty to deprive myself liberty, comparing the other to become anything, a body. He pointed out that we should avoid aberration, that is, straying from the right path of love, which is self-defeating. Therefore, there is need for normal intercourse, which leads to original project for possessing the liberty of the other through objectivity. Nothing that sexual differentiation and acts spring from deeper nature of existence. The desire is to complement rife for the partners in becoming one flesh in the presence of the other. Nothing divine. The ideal end of the desire is a complete incarnation, even if it leads to frustration. This is because the liberty of the other cannot be seized physically. He advised on the importance of noting the complexity of men, that they hate and they love. Therefore, developing a relationship would depend on the actual situation and concrete details of each other. This helps in understanding one another as a factual situation. Despite the relation, we have my existence. We have our own existence that has limitations, that is limited to the things of the other. Our existence limits the freedom of the other. Whatever our actions are, it is in a world where there is already the other and where I'm not wanted in relation to the other that we carry them out. No, the point here is the question of trying to demean, okay, we need one another, but not from a divine perspective. That's the point he's trying to stress, that there are times when even pushing too much the concern for the other means the other person, can even cut your own liberties. 6. The value of human activity in doing and wanting. That is his other point. First, Sartre contends that we must begin by analyzing the notion of our action, of our own action, in order to find the value of human activity in doing and wanting. Second, that the past, the present, and the present can be interpreted and converted into a motive for action. Seventh, liberty of the individual is limited by his or her community. So that's another point now he also brings out. It's like he's trying to create an impression that you as an individual, once you get yourself out of the community, your freedom will be clear, open. So it's still within the individualism, the Western individualism. So according to him, thus, one must act in accordance to his community and situation. But knowing full aware, being fully aware that your own liberty as an individual is curtailed. Lastly, freedom involves responsibility or habits. Freedom involves responsibility or habits. Sartre's argument against liberty. Here, concerning liberty, his argument against liberty or freedom, he pointed out that I'm not free to escape from the rot of my class, the nation, family, or even neither to build up my power, nor to conquer the least of my appetites or habits. So, in other words, even if we have liberty, it still does not help us to escape from the rot of our own classes, our own nation. You cannot say my freedom allows me to escape certain obligations to the family, to the nation, to the family, to the caste, to the nation, to the religion. But he sees all of it as nothing but the so-called liberty is not freeing a person enough. Okay, so he pointed out that it is necessary to obey nature in order to command her. You can also compare. You tell us to compare with things that we cannot change. So here he makes a very good observation that nature has to be respected. That is like talking like an environmentalist or a person who respects the cosmos. For him to be free does not mean practicality of purpose. Okay, it means determining what one wants, not getting what one wants, but determining what one wants in the large sense of choosing how one shall take one's life and what ends one shall pursue. Okay? The past is a key to open the future. As the Greeks used to say, call no man happy until his death. Eh? Call no man happy until his death. One could say, if you want to have such a past, act in such a way. I can choose and continue a tradition or fulfill an engagement, run from an experience, or even ignore it. Therefore, one's liberty is limited by others. One belongs to a nation, family, church, and you have to abide by the regulations. Write it down. You are not free. The existence of others limits my liberty. Death is the worst situation because it is a cancellation always possible of what I can be, which is outside my possibilities. Sartre sums up human freedom being in a situation and defines human pressure in the world. So freedom being in a situation defines human pressure and involves responsibility. In conclusion, he discusses empirical desire that a person in a situation seeks to know the truth about the main. That is the desire of being. This desire is manifested in men or human beings in diverse activities, seeking to do, to make, to have, and to be. In conclusion, this gentleman just creates an impression that a human being can do everything by himself. So he is pessimistic in his outlook, in saying that it is very depressing in order to know how to live and live well. He pointed out that pessimism and skepticism of popular wisdom shows that people have no objection to nature and destiny. People want to think that to live well is easy or impossible, and not to be told it is both difficult and possible. Human presence in the world as liberty is with liberty that goes along with responsibility, which is very true. That is very true. Although he's an atheist, there are things he talks like a bishop. He talks like a person who has, gotten the solution to human problems. For example, when he says that human presence in the world, has to have liberty. Of course, other places he says that liberty also kind of imprisons you in a sense, because you are not free to do. There are things you cannot escape, certain responsibilities. The family, the society, that is quite true. The challenge is when he tries to say we don't need God to do all these things. Okay? When he say it is for individuals to choose their ends, values for success and failure, in other words, he's trying to blame you or blame us or blame an individual directly when he fails, or attribute 100%, everything 100%. When he succeeds, it is him 100%. This may not be true, particularly to those who are not atheists, who sees that success is attributed to God. So it is not just as he says. Man must come to himself and take his destiny in all the business of any morality. Okay? That is to consider life as a match which is won. Lastly, Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, the atheist philosopher, concludes that life is lived by taking a risk. Okay? It's like fighting ceaselessly against any frustrations, against any impediment, against perceived enemies, that can also be very tiresome and exhaustive. So there is a sense in which Sartre also pushes his atheist philosophy in a manner that you may not necessarily agree with him. Nevertheless, he proposes to clear the ruins and reconstruct a dogmatic humanism, just as you talk of dogmatic theology. So he proposes to build such a reconstruct a dogmatic humanism where you rely on the goodness of humanity. That's humanism. And of course, you know what is dogmatic? Something you can't change, something that is doctrinally driven. So he proposes to build something dogmatic humanism, which assumes the eternal human situation, offering liberation of humanity, which starts with a total knowledge of humanity by himself. Okay, yeah, that's a far. You can make a simple comment, and then we move on to the last one, the last topic for tonight.